I'm CK. Tonight we're going to build something from Patching Panda. I haven't built anything by them in a few months, so I wanted to try one of their oscillators. We're going to be building their Operat oscillator. Looks like it's got lots of good stuff going for it, lots of parameters to mess with, lots of controls on the front, lots of CV inputs, 4 outputs from sine, saw, pulse, and square waves. So it looks like a good kit overall. Hope you enjoy the video. Here's the bag. Let's open her up and see what we got inside. We'll start with a bag inside a bag. This should be the circuit boards or board and the front panel. Take a look at it. Patching Panda sticker, got a couple of those already. I don't want to mess this up too much as I open it because it looks like it has writing on the inside. So I'll peel that tape back, open the paper up like so. Interesting. Okay. So, thank you for adopting a Panda in your rack. And it's got pointers to the assembly guide. Now, first thing I immediately notice is it's got a bunch of surface mount components already pre-installed. Drat it. I would have liked to have put them on myself, but that's okay. That's one circuit board, and as you can see, it's the control board with pots, looks like tuning and some amplitude modification. Then there's 4 sliders here, another pot, I assume these are switches, and then a whole bunch of jacks. Let's look at the front panel itself. And VCO. Oh, you can operate it, I guess, as a VCO or an LFO. That's interesting. Frequency modulation, pulse modulation, mix, through and 0, pulse width modulation, H and S, I'm not sure what that is. Then sine wave, saw wave, ramp, and square wave with some inputs there. I'm not quite sure, that's amplitude modification, but I'm not quite sure what that'll do. EXP, not sure what that means. And volts per octave, we know what that means. And here are the outs for each wave, as well as a mix. And this other board is, again, it's a whole bunch more surface mount components already mounted. And it looks like this may be one big chip carrier, you know, one of the daughter board kind of things that has a couple of surface mount processors on it that will mount on this board, I think. Even though it's interesting, this one hole looks plugged. It is blocked. I'm not sure whether it's blocked intentionally or not, or whether that's an indexing thing. And there are 2 trimmers will go on here. Looks like a couple of 4 pin headers to connect the 2 boards. Let me just verify that. Yep. And looks like the power supply is down, or power connector is down here, which makes sense because it's got a little diode and a couple of diodes, and I think those are little inductors. Not certain, but again, it's got the diodes for circuit protection. So that's the board, and yeah, a ton of surface mount components already mounted. Let me see if I can read any of these part numbers. Yeah, it's a couple of op amps, 074 op amps, and I can't, well, that's a 7.2 op amp, so those are the 2x op amps. And then this is something I cannot read really well. It says LM. Let me flip my inner magnifier on, get my head in the shot. I can't read it. See if I can see what's on these other ones. Let me flip that magnifier back up. And again, more op amp, a decade counter, op amp, something that I can't really read, and another something I can't really read. So, whole bunch of componentry in surface mount already mounted on the board. Then we've got IC in there, I'm sure. Let's see what we've got in here. We've got 4 sliders, and we've got a whole bunch of mechanical componentry, all the pots, the jacks, switches, trimmers, and looks like they've been very kind and they've taken all the panel nuts off for us already, which is good. I'm not going to open this one yet, but I am still looking for what goes here. Maybe it's in here. Let me peel the tape off if I can. Let me cut the tape off because I can't do what I want to do. Ah, yes, this is the big daughter board. And as we pull it apart, we can see that it's got, again, a bunch of surface mount components, a bunch of resistors, a few capacitors, and then a chip microprocessor of some type. Again, I can't read the part number on there. I'll get it from the bill of materials. Now, since it does show up like this, I am gonna look and see. Yeah, this is not, this hole shouldn't be blocked. Let me see if I can push this through. I know we're way out of order. I just want to make sure that I don't have to do surgery on that hole. No, it all goes through. And now I'll pull it back out, or maybe I won't. And maybe I won't. Maybe we'll just say, okay, that's installed. Now, interestingly, the notch, as you probably saw it in my hand when I had it a second ago, I can get this out if I take it out evenly. There we go. The notch is on the back side of, or the front side of the daughter board, so you can't see it when it's actually being put together, but that's okay. Put it back on its little foam just for fun. So we are going to be basically putting the mechanical components on, not electrical components, electronic components, because they're already done. So I will go ahead and dump all this out, because this is what we'll be using. This is what we'll be doing. Let me look at the pots. The knobs are okay. They do have metal set screws, but there's no... Actually, I'm sorry, these are metal knobs. Good. Machined metal knobs. That's really nice. They're actually very nice knobs. These are slip-ons. I don't see a set screw on those. And the pin headers are already cut to fit, which is nice. All the panel nuts taken off all the jacks, which is very nice. I always appreciate that. Then a couple of spacers with screws already in them. Let's see where they're going to go. It looks like they're going to go probably here. That looks like a spacer hole. Yeah, looks like a spacer hole here, spacer hole here. So we'll get the soldering iron heated up, and I'll bring the build guide up and we'll take a look at it. So I took a look at the build guide. Unfortunately I did, because I was wrong about how this mounts. This is actually going to mount on the back, like so. But it also says that there are some pin headers. Just to be clear, they list this as a complexity grade red. This is quite a complex build. I don't see it that as such, but again, if you haven't done a lot of eurorack modules and tight modules like this, then it might be pretty challenging. But what I am not seeing is the pin headers that this back PCB is supposed to go onto, because we've got the pin headers for connecting the two boards, but we're supposed to have two strips of pin headers to solder here and then affix that onto those, and I'm not seeing those, which is not good. And there was nothing else in the bag. See again here, solder the power connector and the female sockets here and here. Onto the board on the back. And again, I don't see those pin headers. I can just go ahead and solder that in place as it is, as I talked about before, just on the correct side. But I'm ruminating. I'm trying to decide which way I should do it without the pin headers that I need. It's interesting. It's also interesting that they threw a little Allen wrench in, even though I don't see any Allen head anythings on this. So hold on a second. I've got some spare pin headers. Let me make sure the pitch is correct. Oops, ouch. Bent a pin. And yeah, that pin header strip I have will work. It is disappointing that I don't see it in the bag here, but that's okay. Since I've got spares, we're not stuck. So let's take it in order. We're going to start by putting the trimmers and the voltage regulator. And I'm trying to see, where is the voltage regulator? There it is. And the voltage regulator onto the board first. The two trimmers are, I believe, the same value. I think they're both 5K trimmers. Yes, they are. I'm still bummed that those pin headers that are supposed to be here aren't here. That usually doesn't happen. Power connector goes here, and it's clear where the notch goes, so that's nice. Set that down. do the typical technique of soldering one pin down and lifting it up, and it's all crooked, which is fine because I'll just push on it with my middle finger, reheat that component, that leg, and then it goes flat. Now, one thing I do want to re-emphasize, and I do this whenever we're in a situation like this, when you're soldering on a board that already has surface mount components installed, be very, very careful with your iron, because it is surprisingly easy to brush your soldering tip or the barrel or the base of the tip against an installed surface mount component. You don't notice it, and you've actually dislodged a component from its mount points, and you won't even know you did it, and you won't know what the heck is going wrong when it doesn't work when you fire it up. So just be careful with your soldering iron. Try and do as I'm doing, like right here, and just come straight in from the top instead of trying to get any side action on your iron side of the tip on the iron. Gotta get more solder. Now we're going to do our two pin headers, so we can easily see how many to do, because we've got the daughter board, mini PCB, whatever you want to say. So we'll just cut right below that. And put the spacers on, and I say put the spacers on and solder the trimmers, even though we did already solder the trimmers in step 1. Okay, and they want us to do this technique of mounting the interconnect pin headers. Guys, I'm sorry, there's the bag with the pin headers. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's only 3, which is, I'm not sure what's going on here. But that's more missing pin headers here, which is kind of irritating. Because I've got plenty of spares, but I know many people who might be doing this do not have plenty of spares. And I actually don't have the pin headers I have are not the same height as these, I don't think. Let me double check. No, mine are the same height. Okay. So now I have to cut one more. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm doing it this way because that's what they're saying in the build guide. I typically don't do this. because I find it more of a pain to do it this way than... In fact, I'm not gonna. We'll just do it our regular, ordinary, old way. Let me move those screws aside. Alright, so all the pin headers are soldered down, so we're going to take these screws out. And disconnect the two boards again. Being careful not to bend any pins. And we're good. Okay, next we'll put our two foil caps on. And the foil caps go where? There they go. This one yonder. And the other ceramic cap goes in here. And now they're very adamant that the next steps are critical, full concentration required, because we're going to be putting all the jacks and pots and so on the board. And as they say, if you mess it up, you're going to have a problem. Making an error at this point would be very complicated to desolder. You are informed to avoid unpleasant situation. In other words, we told you folks, be careful. If you're not careful, don't blame us. Now, the jacks, and they're doing something here that some other folks do. They are sharing... Go away, little spider. They are sharing ground pins. I'm not a huge fan of that, but it's not bad. It's just makes fitting them together a little bit more of a pain. Come on, God. So the ground pins are sharing one hole. It makes the circuit board marginally smaller, I guess. But you do have to be careful that you get the ground pins actually in. Now we'll take the sliders, and these are nice little sliders. With LEDs in the handles. Okay, let's get this front panel on. Get my pokey thing to get things lined up. Got everything but the switches. And I think The way this is going to work, I'm sorry, this is not, I don't have the pots down far enough. Let me get those, because I don't have any. There we go. Now, that's as flat as it'll go, I think. And the switches are still a little bit, well, not all of them. Switches are still a little bit, so you can see there's some play here. Oh, and by the way, I didn't show this, I'm sorry. Or you might have seen it in fast motion. This is the red switch, this is the 3-position switch. The rest of them are all 2 positions. But I think I'm going to have to do the pots and the screws and so on, and then push the switches up to get them soldered in place, because they're kind of below grade, or just barely. Actually, these 2 here would work okay. The 3-position might work. It's this one that's a little low, but we'll figure that out in a minute. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do what I typically do when I'm putting a front panel together, is I'm going to tack one of these jack legs down here at the bottom. Down. And then I'm going to do one of these potentiometer legs up here. Get a little more solder there. Try to get this leg. Okay, so those 2 are soldered, tacked down, so I will take one panel nut screw on this jack. If I can get it aligned right. And snug that down some. And then go to this pot that I and I raise the thing up because I'm silly. There we go. And little cattywampus right over here. This is not the easiest one to go together, however, it's not the hardest. If you want to see the hardest one I've done, that would be the dual sequencer by Division 6 with close to 30 LEDs you have to get through the right spots. Now, snug that down, snug that down. So there's how it's going to be. Let me get everything flattened out, because as you can see, the sliders can rock a little bit. So you want to make sure you have them all completely flat to the board. Checking everything. And again, the only thing I'm worried about is getting that switch. I think I may. We'll see. Let me get these others soldered, then I'll come back and do those switches. So it's going to be a bunch of soldering. that's all the soldering. I want to zoom in here. And point out these jack points, solder points, are very, very close to the surface mount chips. There's some more over here. And the resistors. Be very, very careful. And there are scattered resistors, so if you're working over on these two jack pins, these resistors are very close, so you've just got to be very careful with your iron, and you got to be very careful with your solder application. Back off. And because this, I always check my solder joints, but I'm going to be extremely, look at them really close tonight to make sure I haven't bridged or dislodged any of the surface mount components. And that looks like it is the way we want it to be. We got the switches, they all work. What they recommend next is mate the boards. Oh, and I did it wrong. God bless America. I'm going to do something wacky and take this back apart so I can get these screws in, because I messed up. I should have taken the spacer off the back of this instead of on this side. Now I'm going to mate everything. Make sure all the pins are in the right places. Seat it firmly. Sounded good, felt good. Now we'll take those two little black screws again. Now let me drop the front panel back on once again. It all goes on just wonderfully. Now I'm going to speed up playback while I put all the panel nuts on. I'm going to put the knobs on now. Let's go all counterclockwise. This is another one. You got to be up a little bit. You can't push the knob all the way down the shaft. You got to come up like a millimeter or two, maybe 3, or else it rubs against the panel nut. Now one thing as I'm doing this, and I also noticed it when I was doing something else, there's flex between, it's braced up here with the spacer and the pin headers, but down here this board has no support, so it wiggles a little bit. And in fact, if you'll look here, it's 11.5 millimeters between boards up here, where down here it's 10, so it's 1.5 millimeters kind of deflected down. Yeah, and I don't think it'll affect the operation, just something to note. Now we'll take the little mini board, and here's the notch, and here's the notch. So it should go together like so. Again, would be nice if they had put the silkscreen notch on the side you can actually see, but that's okay. Put the power cable in and verify this is 12 volt negative, and that's the red stripe side, so that's all good. Now again, when you're pushing this in, because there's no support here, support the board with your thumb, or else it'll probably flex more than you want it to. Okay, so that's the front. It's the side, the back, other side, top, two trimmers, one for C1, one for C9, and the bottom. Let's put it in the rack and see how it sounds. In the rack, ready to go. Let me turn power on, see if anything catches on fire. Nothing's caught on fire, but I also don't see... Oh, there we go. I didn't see the LEDs in the handle, but that's because the the handle was all the way down. So that's good to know. Let me adjust this because I'm going to bring in the oscilloscope screen here in a second. And let's see what we got. So I'm going to be triggering it from my little MIDI keyboard down here through a Bufaco MIDI thing, which is feeding CV to the Operat and gate to the Frequency Central More VCA, which is going over to an 07 multi from Synthrotech, so I can feed the signal to the little amp as well as to the oscilloscope. And I've got a Synthrotech VCO, LFO, standing by ready to do something. Now, let's take the volume up a little bit. Right now, we probably won't hear anything because all these mixers are down. Now I'm going to bring the sine wave mixer up. Now we've got something, but that's really low. Let me crank up my CV here. I'm not getting what I want. Let me do something else right now for a second. I'm going to let me do some coarse tuning. I'm not getting any CV reaction here. Let me try it here. That's going through my sequencer. Let me speed that up a little bit. That sounds kind of sweet, doesn't it? Let's bring in another waveform. Let's bring in the square wave. Now you notice I just went to VCO instead of LFO. We're obviously way high. Let me do some adjustment on that. That sounds really nice. So let me do some other stuff here. I'm going to take the coarse volume down, or tune down a little bit. So that's with a little frequency modulation in. Let's go to some soft there. Now again, back down to a pure sine. Now I'm going to do something here. I'm going to take the LFO and put the LFO in on the square wave. It's not doing what I thought it was going to do. Now it is. You'll see the input to the square wave output is now connected to the LFO, and the LFO is driving that signal. Let's turn it slower. So as you can see, when you bring an LFO in, it's going to take the CV value coming from the LFO and put it in the range that the mix lever is already at. So it can be a little bit like here, or a lot, like that. So that's pretty neat. Let's go ahead and put the LFO into pulse width. Try it in mod. And then syncing. And on the scope, you can see the waves overlaying each other. Let's go back to LFO. Now we can take that pure Okay, I think I could play with this like all night. This is a very, very rich oscillator with lots of good stuff in it. I've just scratched the surface, but you can see how powerful this is. And again, it sounds really sweet too. It's got a roundness that I really appreciate. So, pretty straightforward build since most of it was surface mount pre-installed. Getting all the jacks in place right and making sure you don't bridge across to any of the existing surface mount components is going to be really, really important as you do this. But once you get it done, it sounds really sweet. I can really recommend this. It's a really good little unit. Hope you enjoyed the video.